This episode is brought to you by Kanye West and his inspirational quote. Class back in session, so we updated grade. 2 years, Dwayne Wade became Dwayne Wade. And hey, please don't stop me. I'm like Charles Barkley. Meet Charles Barkley. I'm Pop the Barkers. I'm hood like Barkers. While y'all was in limbo, I raised the bar up. Welcome to the Stephan Dyer podcast, my people. Hello, my people! Welcome to the Stephan Dyer podcast, where I welcome people with remarkable stories for amazingly vulnerable conversations. I am Stephan Dyer, former banker turned comedian and lifestyle entrepreneur, and this episode with Cathey Armillas was espléndido, increíble. Cathey Armillas is a TED coach, international speaker, marketing expert, who wrote the award-winning book, The Unbreakable Rules of Marketing, 9.5 Ways to Get People to Love You. After episode 44 with Andrea Sampson on TED Talks, the feedback was so amazing, so positive, that I decided to invite Cathey, who I shared a big panel with for the Toastmasters International Conference. And she's an expert on creating and rocking TED Talks. So I was like, we gotta bring her in. Not only is she that, but an amazing person. And also, she created the program How to Rock a TED Talk and is an organizer and coach for TEDxPortland, one of the largest TEDx events in the world, my friends. She's coached a variety of TED speakers, including an executive VP of an international company manufacturing delivery robots, to a rap singer, to a 91-year-old World War II hero. Cathey's super skill of conjuring up delightful, artful stories from the seemingly unremarkable and turning drab clichés into narrative gold is precisely why her training and expertise is sought after by some of the most successful and creative organizations in the world. And I can confirm that because I shared the stage with her big. It was a big panel and she was just lighting it up on fire with her insights. This podcast was on. What do we talk about? We talk about how to end boring presentations. We discuss what it takes to rock a TED Talk. What's the difference between an idea worth spreading and just an autobiography on stage that nobody wants to hear about. She shares how she went viral early in her career under the most weird circumstances. You're going to love it. And this is my favorite part of the episode, we even workshop live a TED Talk idea. If you like this episode, share it, give us a review, screenshot it on your IG stories, and tag us. Stephan Dyer, Cathey Armillas, everywhere. Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Tinder, Grindr, ICQ, WhatsApp, High Five, LimeWire, anywhere and everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, she's a TED coach, international speaker, marketing expert. Enjoy this episode with Cathey Armillas like I know you will. In 3, 2, 1, go. Welcome to the Stephan Dyer podcast. I have here the unbreakable, the unmistakable, the highly capable, the legendary Cathey Armillas. ¿Cómo estás? How are you, Cathey?
Muy bien. Thank you, Stephan. Thank you for saying my last name right. I love it.
Oh, yeah. I'm very excited. We shared a panel at the Toastmasters International Conference, and we didn't know each other. And it was you, myself, Florian. I was actually put into the panel last second because world champion of public speaking Mark Brown couldn't make it as the facilitator, so they called me. Shout out to Mark because he was on the podcast too. And,
hey, Mark.
And then immediately I read up about you because I had to prepare for the panel. And I was like, TEDx coach, presentation trainer, marketing strategist, and speaker. And I'm like, that sounds pretty interesting. Then I heard you on the panel and I'm like, whoa. She knows some shit I don't. And
she knows some shit I don't.
I have to have her on.
Love it.
And I didn't know that that you could be a TEDx coach. So I've done a TEDx talk in Malaysia to talk about how I quit the corporate banking world to pursue my professional career in comedy. The way I prepared, as you can see here in my books right here, there's a TED Talks book by Chris Anderson. And I read it on the flight there. And I was like, I can't. It was me and my business partner doing the TEDx talk. We both quit at the same time in the bank. And I'm like, there's got to be a formula because this is very specific. It's 18 minutes and there's got to be clear do's and or maximum of 18 minutes typically for a TEDx talk, which for those people who don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's independently organized event. And there's thousands, I think, around the world. And then the TED ones without the little X on the side are more closely related to the brand. There's one in Vancouver. There's one in other places in California, obviously, I think. So I read the book on the way there, maximum 18 minutes, and we got to find some do's and don'ts. Then I found out about you through this panel. And I'm like, wow, there is actually people who teach you to do this. What's the process to become a TEDx coach?
Well, that's a loaded question, Stephan, because I think a lot of the TEDx coaches around the world, they were all probably happy accidents. Many of them, I think, were past TEDx speakers at an event. And then the organizers are like, hey, you went through this, you know what it took to prepare, including reading books on flights on the way to your TED Talk, like things like that. Like, so like, could you help coach? And I think a lot of people say yes. And then I think there's a few of us out there where our professional worlds converge and we're like, well, we're doing this professionally as well. And so then we agree to volunteer for a local TEDx event and help coach the speakers, which is what I do. I'm a coach, TEDx coach at TEDxPortland. And I do that on a volunteer basis. So I'm part of that core team, and we put together the largest TEDx event in the United States, one of the largest in the world. So there's a lot of things that we probably do different than other TEDx events that are a little bit smaller. So I can't speak for all. And, but we also have coaches on our staff, if you will, or on our core team that also were past speakers and really just get kind of that, what you're talking about. Like, there's no 100% formula to anything, but if there is a formula, which there is kind of, they understand it.
And just to understand logistically, so for example, in my TEDx event at a university in Malaysia, the University of Putri, Malaysia, there was 10 speakers. And I know that some events have 8 speakers, some of them have 10, maybe some of them have 12. If it's a bigger one, I don't know, they'll have 14. But logistically, where does the coach come in? Because does every speaker perform it before they actually perform it to everyone? And then you come in like, hey, what about this? What about that? Or do they send you the speech written in written form before? Like, where do you come in, or do you come in upon request?
Yeah. Well, I can't speak for everybody, but here's totally my process. So I'm just going to speak from my own experiences and just know that there's an array of experiences out there. And I think there's a lot of people are doing what you're saying. Like, they'll come with the talk already done, and then a coach will listen to them and go, oh, maybe lift your eyebrow up a little bit more when you say that, or,
yeah.
But I like to come in at the beginning. In fact, there's been quite a lot of people know that I have this like unorthodox way of doing things. I don't let people write their speeches. And there's been many times when people will come to me and be like, here's my talk. And I'm like, awesome. Like, let's rip it up and start from scratch. We're not doing that. Because I believe that it starts from the idea. And that is really the big formula for TED. And for all of your podcast listeners that are listening, I understand. And Stephan, I love what you're doing here, because you are an amazing comedian. When I first met you and you were leading our panel, I was like, oh, this guy's gold. Like why was he in banking? What is going on?
Thank you.
But you understand that like you have to take what we're doing and we have to translate it into business results, right? So even the TED model, what I'm about to tell you, everybody should listen to, even if you're listening and you're like, oh my gosh, I never want to give a TED talk. But what's that magic that you could use in what you do? It's the idea. And the idea has to be so strong and so clear. You can't move forward until you know what that is. So I'll spend 6 weeks sometimes just going, okay, what's the idea? And, I think I talked about it with you before, but I'll explain it for your listeners. Like sometimes I'll do like the blank page exercise where I'll tell one of my clients, take a blank piece of paper. And if 100 people in a room were to come into that room and go, oh, Stephan's going to talk about this topic, whatever it is, write down everything the audience would expect you to say. Everything. Think about everything that they would expect you to say on that topic. And don't do that. Don't say that. Don't say those things. Right. And so it's like first trying to find out what angle you could even the idea alone has to have the right angle. So always start there. Always. So that's the first preparation. So obviously, as you can see, my coaching requires a minimum of like 3 months. I need a runway because I need to first really, nail that down.
The idea takes that long. Wow.
Well, the idea varies, right? Some people, I worked with a lady, for instance, in Luxembourg. She's a sleep expert, and she got asked to give a TEDx talk in France. And of course, this is her work. Like they're like, oh, we're fascinated by what you do. And she's funny because she takes sleep and puts it next to sex. And she's like, this is how sleep and sex is. So, I mean, they probably had a pretty good idea of what her talk was going to be, but when she came to me, we're like, okay, well, let's hack through what the idea actually is. I mean, is it sleep is like sex, or is it like something else? So we still worked really hard to find, an idea, and that can take a while. And for some people it can take a little while, and for some people it can take longer, but a lot of people try to like push through that, and they just start by going, I have to write a speech. That's what I have to do. Yeah.
And a lot of people think that
backwards.
A lot of people think that because you're subject matter experts at something, they need to talk about that, but that's easily Googleable. I mean, if you're a subject matter expert about, you could just Google that about the person. They probably have a program anyways. So about that. And then
exactly
the other school of thought is that, and where people go wrong, I hope we didn't do that. I mean, now that I look back, it was 2018 after listening to you. We could have done so many things better, but it's okay because it's part of everyone's journey.
Don't feel bad. Mine's from 2014. I'm like, every time somebody watches my TED Talk, I'm like, oh my God, please.
Yeah. And then the other school of thought is they think that they need to fit in a lifetime, their biography in 18 minutes.
Yeah.
And clearly it's not the case. It's the idea. I remember in the panel.
Yeah.
And this is the power of the idea. Because you didn't even talk a lot about this, but you just talked about it enough that I had to go watch it. And you talked about this TEDx talk or TED talk about why skyscrapers should be wood, like made out of wood or something.
Yes.
And I went and watched it. I couldn't stop watching it.
Right.
And it's an incredible idea. And
it's no, sorry. Go ahead, Stephan.
Going back to your process, write all the things down of what people expect you to say and don't say them. I think it's great because when I think about comedy, because my mind always goes to comedy and speaking and setup and punch, the best punches, in other words, the best output for your input is when it's unexpected, when people don't expect it. If the punch is super predictable, nobody's going to laugh. In other words, not that we're going for a viral video, but the potential, the leverage that you get from this idea, it's so much bigger if it's unpredictable and 200 other people haven't done a TEDx talk about it. So I totally agree.
Or in that way, right? Like when I told you about that, so great. I mean, that does show you the power of an idea. When I said that I was, it's my sister that she's an architect, and she's like, you have to watch this TED Talk. And I was like, okay, I'll watch it. Finally, I watch it. And then I'm like 6 minutes into it. I'm like, we should build wooden skyscrapers. Like, I'm like so into this. Like, I'm like, why are we not building wooden skyscrapers? I was so sucked in the way he did this. It was brilliant. And of course, think about this guy. He is a subject matter expert. If he were talking to people in his industry, it probably would have been a lot different, but he made this a big, wide, open idea that anybody could understand and get behind. And that is super powerful. Like,
and that's an idea worth sharing.
Spreading. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Worth spreading.
Yep. We're spreading. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yep.
I love it. So you started in, you were in marketing, you were in advertising, and I heard, because I did my research, you have a very interesting story with a YouTube viral video a few years ago. Can you share a bit about that and how the marketing and the storytelling worlds collided to just go viral on YouTube?
Yeah, Stephan, that's in internet years, it was like 1,000 years ago. But if we can go back to 2005, when YouTube first started, I was working as a director of marketing at an industrial shredder manufacturer. And if anybody out there is thinking what I thought when I first went to the company and I was interviewing for this job, I was like, oh, big paper shredders. But when I got there, I was like, well, I'm sorry, you're shredding torpedoes? Wait, what?
What?
Wow. Okay. Like big shredders, that's shredding like construction and demolition debris and cars and, pieces of houses and entire boats in one single swallow. And so when I showed up, when I first started working there, when I got the job, I saw this wall of why I say wall of videos is because they were still on the old, high 8 tapes. Remember the Super 8 tapes? And so I'm sitting there going through all these videos and I'm like, wow, this is so fascinating. And I started a campaign called Watch It Shred. We did some print advertising where we were showing the things that we were shredding and not just the shredder. So here's another point to the audience, right? Here's another way to angle it. Everybody in our industry was like, here's our shredder. And they all looked the same. Maybe one was green and the other one was blue and somebody did it gray. And it's like, awesome. It's a shredder. And then when we did the Watch It Shred campaign, we were showing torpedoes and boats and soccer balls and mattresses. So we were showing the actual application. And I put a video up online on YouTube, and I put a video up online right before YouTube launched, actually. And I put a couple videos up on our website, and it went viral. Some blogger found out about it, and the David Letterman show called me, which is not in existence. And called me. This guy's like, I'm Mike from the David Letterman show. I literally hung up on him. Not even kidding, Stephan. I was like, yeah, whatever. And but I found out it was actually the David Letterman show. And we did a big shoot in our parking lot with a whole bunch of items. And when YouTube launched, it was about 6 months later. I was like, oh, this seems like a natural place to put our videos. And they went viral. So that really showed me the power of a good idea too, even in that aspect, right? Here we were, a kind of a dirty, dingy industrial shredder manufacturer, nothing very sexy about it until you actually shine it on a different light. And then all of a sudden, millions of people are like, wow, this is awesome. And so it turned it from the normal thing to something spectacular. So then I left that company. I wrote a book, The Unbreakable Rules of Marketing, 9.5 Ways to Get People to Love You, because that's all marketing is, getting people to love you. And one of my marketing clients, a video producer, funny enough, I was like, why are you doing videos like this? You should do videos a little bit more that's in your wheelhouse because you're awesome. And so he kind of, we use the model of why aren't you doing the shredder type videos? And he got asked to give a TED Talk, and all of a sudden, boom, I was like, marketing person. And then my client wants to give a TED Talk. And so I coached him, and then I was like, what is this? What does marketing and TED Talks have to do with each other? Well, all of TED Talk is a mini marketing campaign for an idea. That's all it is. So those two worlds came together. That's kind of the short-ish, longish version of that.
Fascinating. I want to dig deep. I don't know if this isn't part of my scheduled questions, but I want to see if of the questions that I wrote. But I want to see if we could come with like an example of what are bad ideas and what could be a good spin on it, because it's there. It's just the angle in many ways, because a lot of people have crazy things that have happened to them. A lot of people have unorthodox career paths, but it's like a premise in comedy. Yeah, it's like,
yes,
it's tough to be an immigrant. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but a lot of people think that. But if you have a unique spin to all comedy is, apart from truth and pain and tragedy plus time and timing, obviously, but all it is
comedy.
Yeah, it's what's your unique point of view on this specific topic, and obviously there has to be a clear emotion that you're communicating throughout the premise on the topic. So yeah, it's frustrating. It's just frustrating to be an immigrant, tough to be an immigrant, indifferent about being an immigrant. So it could be same thing, but your unique angle makes it better. It makes it more marketable. So let's
totally like your talk might be why broken English is great for me, as opposed to like my life sucks as an immigrant or something. And that gets you thinking, and then it's a unique angle and it's very specific to the person. But then the person might have a bigger idea in that maybe will be, it needs to be, right? Like for it to be a really great idea, it needs to maybe start with that person's story, but then it needs to kind of open up into a space where how would that relate then back to the audience at large? Like how will that one experience that person had as an immigrant, how can we flip that around into this weird, unique angle? But then even do another flip in there, right? Another unexpected kind of jab or punch, if you will, of like, oh, even though I'm not an immigrant and maybe I didn't start off coming to this country with broken English, I have a shared experience with you, or that idea means something to me, Exactly. And so maybe it will be maybe the whole thing. And I'm just doing this on the fly. By the way, everybody watching, he just threw this at me. This is not planned. There was no, this is the question. Immigrant, like this was, if I was thinking about this, one of the things that might be a shared experience is when you go through something really tough and it's really hard, you become really good and masterful or something like that. And that might open the way. So that might be the general idea, but we would do it a little bit more unique. But that might be the general idea that we go, that could be the shared experience. And that could make the idea really wide and get more people to relate to that idea. And then we'd start looking for the unique way to say that, or the exact unique angle.
I love it. I have another example, because this is the exact conundrum, so that I can use complicated words and my audience thinks that I'm smart.
I love it.
On the plane, we were thinking, okay, so Huang and I are on the way to Malaysia, and we both quit our senior manager bank juicy paycheck jobs. I
love it, juicy.
To be comedians, which in hindsight, I mean, if you only look at the numbers on paper, it would seem like a dumb idea. But what we wanted to do is, so the talk is the payoffs of chasing after your dreams. But on the plane, we were like, should we talk about how two bankers quit their jobs to become comedians? I mean, that's an interesting story, but it's not that relatable, because not everyone is quitting their jobs. If you're not a banker,
don't want to be a comedian.
You're not quitting your job. You're not 25, 29, and we didn't have kids. We didn't have a mortgage. We weren't have a lot of responsibilities, but there's gotta be a universal message of fuck everything else. I'm doing my passion. Nobody has to quit their job and become a comedian to overcome certain situations. So we tried to give it a unique spin of the payoffs of chasing after your dreams, but I'm not sure if it was that effective. What do you think?
Yeah, well, so here's where it gets a little there's kind of layers to all this, right? A really good idea on the top layer will be like, oh, that's a good idea. If I tell you something, you either just if I give you a couple things, like I'm gonna tell you, here, we'll do this off the cuff. I'll tell you a couple of ideas. You tell me good or bad. Like this is a good idea. Okay. Bullying is bad. Good or bad idea.
Good.
I mean, at the top level only, right? Good or bad idea. Good. If you say bad, you're a bad person. Just a side note. Right? Like on the top level, like good, bullying is bad. Okay, good idea. Awesome. But that's the top level. There's nothing, doing something creative to find financial freedom. Good or bad idea?
Good.
Good, right? But you're hesitant all these because they're all good ideas, but they sound terrible, right? They're just like, okay, there's nothing to that idea. There's no hook to that or whatever. So the first level is just finding out the actual idea. Like, what are you actually going to talk about? And one that you said, the payoff to your, what is it? What was it again?
The payoffs of chasing after your dreams.
Your dream. The payoffs of chasing after your dream. That it's super general. So there's two different ways to go, right? So that's super general. And somebody has to go, oh, okay, I could see myself in that. Or, sometimes there's this whole science of like the bait of the title. And two bankers that quit their jobs to become comedians. I would even might have add together, like even adds another layer of like, wait, what? And they did it together. Like this whole thing is very interesting. But the minute you get in there, you have to do the second layer. You have to do the third layer. You start to open it up to the audience. I'll give you a great example. There was a lady that gave a TED talk. Her name's Ash Beckham. And she in her TED talk, she describes herself as being a militant lesbian type. And she's like, I used to work at this cafe and people would come into the cafe with their kids and the kids would be like, are you a boy or are you a girl? And the parents are like, mortified. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. And she starts talking about her experience in like trying to decide. She's never really come public with that part of her life. And so should I be an advocate? I'm kind of living in a closet. And up until that point, you're like, if I don't completely identify with her experience, I can listen and be entertained, or I can be inspired by her idea, but it doesn't feel like it's to me. But the minute she took your premise, I'm going to go with your words, Stephan, she's like, the minute she took the premise of like, the premise is, I'm living in a closet, and a closet is no place for a person to live. But you could be in a closet if you're working at a banker job that you hate and you don't want to be there, or you have cancer and you haven't told your family, or you're in a horrible relationship that you're afraid to get out of. Like, so she kind of opened it up to everybody else. And so that was another layer of it. Right. And so, have messed around with your idea and said, where do we want to start and how do we layer in the audience and make it about them? That's probably, even though it might sound like super easy, there's one of your don'ts. It's the biggest mistake that I think speakers in general, storytellers, TED speakers, of course, make the mistake. It's not about you. Your story qualifies you to be in front of that audience, to give them that idea. But honestly, the idea belongs to the world. And if you make the idea, if the idea has to involve you, it's not a good idea. Does that make sense? Like if the idea has to involve you, it's just not a good idea. Think about companies, people that have made millions of dollars. When does it become a really good idea? When it goes above and beyond the founder, or becomes a movement, and so to me, that's where there's a lot of work. And although on the top level, when you watch a TED Talk, you're like, oh, that was easy. The person just talked about their story and gave you a good idea. I promise you, they probably worked with a coach, and we've had many of these conversations.
It seems to me like we could start with your own story, and then somewhere closer to the beginning, between the beginning and the middle, that story begins to become universal, so that it's applicable. When I look back to our TEDx talk, people ended up, because we got a lot of messages, inspired wow, this is a crazy story. And I think that's where it ended. This is a crazy story. Cool.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. But I don't think the idea was spread, because it was a story about how we quit.
Yeah. Can I give you an exact? So I coached a lady from Brazil that moved to Portland. Her thing is almost exactly identical. And I'll show you a different spin on something that's almost identical, because she quit this high paying job to start a business in the restaurant industry that is known to be like, restaurants are not super successful. And she left this super high paying job. But when I started talking to her, I was like, let's go back to your history. And we kind of really talked about a lot, and we were and I got to the spot where I found out that her mom died when she was a teenager in Brazil. She got forced to move to the United States. And then a series of things happened to her. She met a mentor in San Francisco, and then she ended up getting this high paying job. And then she realized that she was just super unhappy. And so she quit to start her company. And what we ended up doing was finding this really weird, unique angle that there's only 2 times that major changes happen in your life. It's when you get pushed or you jump. She got pushed when her mom died, right? She couldn't, her mom died, and then her family moved her. She moved in with family that was in the United States. When she started the restaurant, she jumped. So that was immediately she quickly, and we started it with a challenge to the audience. So I think and this is not, again, Stephan, there's no formula that works for everybody 100%. In every single scenario, right? But in this particular one, we had her ask the audience a question that already challenged their thinking. So we already knew where we were going to take them. It's you question to challenge their thinking. And then you go into your story a little bit. And then you come up with this kind of premise of there's only 2 times that a major thing's going to happen. So do you need to jump? And so then you can pose all these things, even if you don't ask the audience in particular, because now you got the audience doing their own thinking. Oh, geez. Well, yeah, I just got divorced. That was a push. Okay. Ooh, I work at a job that I really need to quit. I'm not a banker, but I'm not from Brazil. My mom didn't die, but you start putting yourself into the push, get pushed or jump kind of model. And that's kind of one of the things that I found out when I watched over 1,000 TED Talks when I was doing my How to Rock a TED Talk program. I started to realize that people had a concept, if Simon Sinek's was the golden circle, that people don't care what you do or how you do it, they only care about why, that, these are concepts that people can cling on to more than just your beautiful words, or if you inspire them or they laugh or they think you're funny. There's a concept that they can actually grab out of it and start to tell other people. And if it's repeatable and it's easily repeatable to else, you probably have a good concept in there as well. So that's a way that I would probably talk to you two about it. I would have kind of dug in there and been like, okay, well, how can we universalize this, but at the same, and have a concept for the audience, but at the same time, y'all are comedians, be funny, make it, add in your beautiful piece to it for sure. And that's a don't right there. That's where people go too far on the spectrum. Either it's oh, it's 100% my story. No, because people aren't you. So they can't relate to 100% of your story. And then people go to the other spectrum where it's oh, I need to give information. I'm the subject matter expert. And you said it at the beginning. I'm sorry, I can Google information, but I can't Google an idea. I can't. There's a reason that some of us that create, we have intellectual property. The way that we think about something. Think about this. I'm going to tell you something crazy right now, Stephan. I'm super excited. I've been watching the Halloween, series my whole life. I love that movie. I'm really into scary movies. Are you like scary movies?
No, I'm very scared of scary.
Okay. Well, but do you know about how there's always the characters, right? And then the Halloween character, there's Michael Myers. He's the brother of Jamie Lee Curtis, and her name's Laurie Strode or something like that in the show, in the movie or in the series. And he's always trying to kill her. Every movie, it's exactly the same, right? But the set designers are always trying to come up with a way to just freak you out. And part of the original premise of this movie was they originally didn't want to do they wanted to do a horror flick with no blood, and so they had to use really creative scenes on how do you scare people. Well, number one, they had to make him look really ungodly scary. They took they didn't have a lot of money. They had $300,000. And even though this is like late 70s, like still movies had like $1 million budgets. Their set designer went to a costume store and found a Mr. Spock face mask, brought it back. And, you know, so it's Captain Kirk. Sorry, I don't watch. It's Captain Kirk. So they took it and they opened up the eyes a little bit more. They shaved off the sideburns. So it was this weird, they messed up the hair. They kind of melted the face a little bit. And then they sprayed it appliance white. And it just made the face look dead. So you take something and you morph it into something else, even though it originally started like that. So think about this. If we're going with the analogy of a story or an idea, that's what we can do as great communicators, right? And so it became something else for the audience. And then they did these creative shots where they have a shot, for instance, that they showed where the sister was in a room and she's running from, you know, Michael Myers. And they have a closet back here, but you can't see it. It's all blacked out. And then slowly, like light is shining on his face just a little bit. So he kind of appears. And as the audience, you're watching, you're like, oh my God, he's right behind her, right? They didn't have to do the gore to scare you. They used a technique. So if I go back to speaking, sometimes when people tell a story, they tell you the end at the beginning. Yeah. In a joke, they tell you something that tells you where the ending's going, right? Yeah. So we have to find a way to morph something for the audience, to make it unexpected, to make it different, to intensify it. And so that's our job. And that's how we can grab more people into it as well. Like,
I love it. I think there's the speech part and having the idea. The title, as you said, is going to get a lot of people to watch it, even if they don't know who you are. And I think that's an important piece. But I think the majority of people have the speech and then they come up with a title, unless they have an incredible title, and then they go from there. But I find, because I have a lot of people who want to do a TEDx talk, but they don't know, let's assume, just for example's sake, that they have the idea and they have the speech. What would be the natural process for people to apply? And here's what I tell people. It seems to, well, we got invited, but I know a lot of independently organized TEDx events, you have to apply, and you have to apply with the idea. And logistically, this looks like you have to write it, type it down. And for people to, because you're not going to send the speech, you have to type down the paragraph or the idea, the application. And what would you recommend for that paragraph to be well written? Because a lot of people nobody speaks like they write. You might have an incredible writer, but a horrible speaker. You might have someone with an incredible idea, but a horrible writer. You don't 100%. always get like one person with all the skills. So just an idea. I mean, you could potentially hire a copywriter to just put all your ideas down into a nice compact paragraph. But if people don't want to spend that money or can't spend it, what would you recommend?
Well, Stephan, number one, that's a brilliant idea. That's an out-of-the-box idea right there, because now you're looking at it more through the lens of a copywriter will be looking at this from the lens of like, what's that grabbing? I mean, it almost becomes you're starting to create the campaign for the idea already, and copywriters are brilliant at that, right? That's on the marketing side of things. This is what we do all the time. We're trying to find that essence that you want people to walk through your door. And so you can't just shove people through your door. So you kind of have to like have this little crack of the door open, and they have to be like, what's behind that door? And some people try to throw everything that's in the house, out on the street and say, come into my house. Well, I don't need to come into your house. Everything's already on the street. And so the copywriter can do that thing, right? that you're talking about. And so I think that's a great idea. Another thing here, I'm about to tell you the biggest don't. So this might be like don't number 2, right? Is please don't go to TEDx organizers and be like, I'm a famous comedian or great speaker or I have this amazing book and I just want to use your stage to make myself be more amazing. And I mean, I'm saying it with a little bit of hashtag S, sarcasm /S, whatever. But really you would be surprised, Stephan, how many people go to organizers and they're like, I give this speech all the time. And they're like, oh, well, thanks for telling me that. That's not a unique idea then. I mean, if I can already Google you and find this talk out there, we don't want it on a TED stage. That doesn't qualify for what we want. So here's what I would do. I think that you don't have to. So a lot of the organizers now, and I'm friends with so many people across the world that are organizing TEDx events. So of course I've heard lots of things. A lot of people are asking for more because they're getting hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of submissions, depending on how big or well-known their event is. Imagine that you're the person that's like, okay, submission. Yeah. And you're having to pitch it to a team, but you're like the first stop, right? And so you're like, okay, I have to pitch forth like 30 that I think would be good. The one that's going to write this long ass thing, you're like, I can't read that. My brain broke. Like I'm out. And so you have to be smart about, you're marketing yourself all the time as a human being, and everything that you do, you're constantly marketing yourself. And that is one way where you might misunderstand what's going on in this transaction of you applying. You might think, oh, they're so interested in hearing my whole long drawn out story. Nope, they're not. I promise you. Get to the premise, get to it quick, make it interesting.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk.
The economics of words. I love it. I always tell my students for our public speaking through comedy courses, where it's 6 weeks. And then on the 7th week, actually, which was last night, they do a grad show. So for the 7 weeks we prepare, we start to write a lot of premises, like 40 premises. They come as homework. We read them out loud, 10 a week. And the audience, so the other students, get to vote on which they would love to hear most on the stage.
Stephan, I want to be in your class next time, by the way.
Yeah,
hello.
Yeah. I think you would love it. And we would do it online.
I love that.
In person. So the 10 other students or the 8 other students become a sample size of what a larger audience will be. So as you know, if you get 40 premises and we pick 2 or 3 winners a week, you may have like 8 to 10 by the end. You're throwing
away.
Yeah.
You're throwing away 38 of them. Yeah.
Exactly. So
that's exactly what the organizer's doing. Exactly.
So you come up for class 5 with your first draft. On week 5, you come up with your first draft of your winning 8 to 10 premises. Yeah. And then after that, we throw out and just keep the best 2 or 3 out of the 40, if you think about it. Because out of the 40, you get 9 winners. And then out of the 9 winners, you only take 2 or 3 to the grad show. So when people see the grad show, they're like, oh my God, you're incredible. This is your first time doing it. And well, but we've been editing the entire we've been creating. Yeah. And after creating, we're editing. Because if you edit, when you're creating, it's very hard to come up with bulk that you need to you need bulk to pick out the diamonds. In stand-up, there's a saying that 90% of everything you write goes to the garbage. And really, that's what you want, because you don't want people to see the garbage on. I mean, there's a process, obviously, but you want to take the best version of you on stage. So
well, and can I interject something in here? Because I believe that you're probably doing what I'm doing with my blank sheet thing. The stuff that you throw away is actually necessary too. You can't get to the creative stuff. I found that my clients cannot think about it. If I were just to say, okay, Stephan, give a TED Talk tomorrow, give me the idea. You're like, right? You can't just, and that's an issue, because a lot of people think comedians are brilliant, and they are, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of prep and there's a lot of creation. There's a lot of editing, but the 90% of the stuff that's written on here is absolutely necessary. I call it cutting through the cliche. My clients have to cut through the cliche, and I have to get the cliche out. If not, they're always in the back of their mind. They're coming up with this, they want to say this cliche thing. And I'm like, nope, let's get it. Yeah. I love that. Love that. That's so great.
One of the books that changed my life is called The Artist's Way. Have you heard about it?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
By Julia
Absolutely.
Cameron. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I started doing it, recommended by Diona Griffin-Irons, who is the former director, diversity and inclusion at the Second City. And I did a program there in 2018, and she had it all. She had like a bunch of pages. So I bought it, and under the premise of in line with the premise of throwing stuff out, what you and I are talking about is that the brain is like a well. You just all the ideas that you think are funny or great, funny in comedy and great for TEDx, let's say, you already have them in the tip of your tongue because you've been thinking about them for your entire life. And maybe they're good, but the magic happens when you think you have nothing else. So for because you're cutting through the cliche. So in The Artist's Way, one of the mandatory things that you need to do is morning pages, as you know. And morning pages is you wake up, and as soon as you wake up, you write 3 pages. Like you just write whatever. You don't know what to write, you just write. And then the ideas that you have, it sounds very weird, but you need to get them out of your brain onto the page. And then it's so insane how you start to create after the first or second page. You're like, where did this come from? So it's like it's like a master's degree in like incredible self-awareness, but you can't see you from another angle because you're just blinded by the ideas that have been in your brain forever. They're still there because you've never thrown them out. You never wrote them anywhere. So I love cutting through the cliche. And again, if you haven't taken them out, chances are a lot of people have thought about them anyways. So
right.
The creativity will come out later.
I love that stuff. And because like the whole process of In the Artist's Way. And I think that is such a brilliant thing. Like for me, I ended up having to write 2 books and I hate writing, but the only time that you get to good writing is when you get through the crappy writing, right?
Yeah.
You just start writing, you're like, oh, that sounds terrible. You reread, you spend 8 hours on one paragraph and you just say, fuck it. And then you just start writing and get something great. And then you scrap everything that you wrote before because you were like, I spent 9 hours on one paragraph. And then all the stuff that came after was wonderful. I love that. And I think it's good to mention, I don't know if you have your students do this with their premises as well, but you've probably heard me say, like, I'm a huge advocate for keeping a story file. I was keeping a file of stories, and my story file has now come to be like, sometimes it'll even be like something I heard, right? And I'm like, oh, that's a really cool thing, or things that I remember. But that's another slow leak process of getting things out of your head, but putting them somewhere where you can capture it. And there was the famous opera singer, an Italian opera singer, that he used to like write these beautiful lyrics, and people are like, well, how do you come up with these? And he's like, oh, every word that I hear in my life that I love, I keep it in a book. I write it down. Of course. Like you can't just like write brilliant lyrics on okay, I'm going to have to write an award-winning like opera song right now. Where should I start? So I think we are getting to the practice of creativity is a practice. It's a discipline, and I love that that's where this conversation went. Because people think that just because they're an expert at something, you can't just tell people information and then, that's not how it works, And
I think a lot of subject matter experts are horrible speakers. Like,
oh my God. And yes. And, I always have this famous saying, there's no such thing as a boring topic. It's only boring speakers. Like a boring speaker can make any topic horrible, and any great speaker can make like the most odd, weird, thing that you think you wouldn't want to hear, and it can make it sound great. I'm going to throw something at you. I'm going to give you a line because you're a comedian, and like, let's play with this for a minute. So I wrote this in my story file the other day. I was chatting with my mom. My mom just moved back to Portland. She moved from Arizona. We like moved all our stuff. And my mom, I don't know how a single person can have this much stuff. It took like me, my husband, and my sister to all fly in. I get her in this huge 26-foot U-Haul, and we drove her stuff up, and we get to her house, right? And I'm looking at her new apartment, 2 bedrooms. She's one person, all this stuff. And we have this stuff and it's not even unpacked yet. And you can barely walk around it. And then my mom somehow magically like puts everything away in like 2 days. She's got like crazy energy and it looks beautiful. I asked my mom, I go, oh my God, how did you do that? And she said that her stuff, she goes, my house is cluttered, but it's nicely cluttered. And I was like, that's hilarious. I put it in my story file and I don't know when I'm going to use it. In fact, I'm telling it to you now. She just told it to me like 2 days ago. And I just put in my story file, it's nicely cluttered. My mom said that about her crazy cluttered apartment. And it could be a funny thing. I could tell a story about it, but let's see, I captured that little moment and I could probably do so many things. We could even do a TED talk on that. We could use that story and say, but our brains get cluttered because that's kind of where we were going, right? Our brains get cluttered. So we could use my mom's story as an endpoint to make your brain nicely cluttered. Ooh, see, and then it becomes an idea like, but you could also make it comedy, right? And so there's a lot of ways to make this
funny. I always say that the easiest way, going back to the economics of words, I always tell my students, like, why would you say 13 sentences and get the same laugh if you could say 5 sentences?
Or one,
or one, and get that same punch, So in the case of your mom, we could do many things. We could tell the entire story and then read it out loud. And then what I get to do with my students is wherever you think there's a punch or where people can laugh, you hit enter, like you in the keyboard, like you'll hit enter, which forces you when you read it and when it's printed to pause. And then because if you keep talking, you're gonna interrupt a potential laugh. So you need to pause, allow people to process the setup, and then they can laugh at the punch. And then as you're doing this, you write it, you hit enter. Now you read it to an audience and you videotape it. And where they laugh, where they actually laugh, or you get some sort of a reaction, you'll circle that. And then you go back to the drawing board and you're like, if you have more than 3 or 4 consecutive, let's go for it with 4. If you have more than 4 consecutive sentences without a punch, without a reaction from the audience, you're talking too much. It's too much. Yeah. Get rid of it. Cut it down.
Get to the punch faster.
Get to the punch, because the whole idea is you only have a finite amount of time on stage. You can't talk for 9 hours. You got 5 minutes or you got 7 minutes. So you want to have a higher laughs per second rate per se. Yeah. So the other way the other way to use to get your mom's story to be funnier is she doesn't talk like you. So you could imitate her. In other words, I always tell my students,
guys. You always say,
don't tell me, show me. I always imitate my mom or my wife. My wife is Venezuelan. My mom is Peruvian. So I don't say my wife told me. I don't say my wife told me be careful with the Tupperwares. I say my wife said, "Ay, chamo, be careful with the Tupperwares." So it's her, like you're with me there, you know?
Yeah.
The other thing you could do with her, the nicely cluttered, is funny because it's like you're saying the opposite of what you want to say. There's a little bit of irony. It's like me saying, "Oh, I love Mexico City. There's no traffic." Like obviously there's a lot of traffic.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why it's funny. So you could do comparisons. My mom is like a blank, and then you say 3 things that they are similar. But the more unpredictable the punch, so the 3 things that you're comparing them to, it's funnier. For example, if I say my dog is like a vacuum cleaner, now you're thinking, what's he gonna say? Let's come up with a punch. If there's food
you're
on
thinking
the floor,
he's going to say he sucks, or
he sucks. Like that's good. My dog is like a vacuum cleaner. Anything that's on the floor disappears. My dog is like a vacuum cleaner. It's loud. But the more unpredictable the punch, the bigger a laugh you're going to get. So very similar to the ideas. The more unpredictable, the chances are that a lot of more people are going to like it. Because if the same idea, everybody else has it, there's 300 TED Talks about it. Totally. It's limited. So we can do a lot of things with it. But the main thing is, don't tell me, show me. Like, I want to be there with you. Russell Peters, one of the best Canadian comics, what he does is he tells you the premise and then he acts it immediately. So he's like, have you ever noticed that Russians sound like trailers? And he's like, I don't even, I just made that up.
Yeah. Totally.
He'll tell you, and then he'll act it. Yeah. And then it's immediately visible. You're there with the person. And
he showed you.
He showed you. Okay. We're coming towards the end of this life-changing interview.
This conversation was amazing. I loved how we had the analogies of like a TED Talk and great ideas and what people do in their lives and like comedy and how they're all like, it all kind of is similar.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I think there's a big learning lesson here about, we got to get to the point. You got to get to the point. People don't have 3 hours. And I know that you have 2 books. I know that one is a book / program. So you have the Unbreakable Rules of Marketing and you have How to Rock a TED Talk. Can you briefly describe, first of all, where can people get or buy these programs and what each is about?
Yeah. So in just a quick thing, you can find everything at my website, Cathey Armillas. And Stephan, you did it so good at the beginning. I'm like, I got to up my game on my last name, right? You can find both of them there. I think the Unbreakable Rules of Marketing was literally a kind of marketing therapy psychology book. I love psychology. So it's the psychology of marketing. And it probably will be relevant 100 years from now when I'm not even here. It's just the psychology and what people, why people buy things. The How to Rock a TED Talk is a lot of the stuff we talked about today. It's a program where I actually run people. It's like a coach. It's like me. I'm a coach in a box and they get to listen to me. It's audio. And I just take them through how to prepare and how to actually deliver a TED Talk. So that's what it is.
I love it. And then we're going to finish off with the rapid fire question. So.
Okay. Rapid fire.
Here we go. I lose track of time when I
bite my nails.
Beautiful. What have you done in the past 3 months that makes you feel proud?
Gosh, that's like a really hard question. Okay. A thing that I've done the last 3 months that makes me feel proud. I helped a mom who survived domestic violence and she became the CEO of this nonprofit organization. And I helped her come up with an idea that she can use for her company in a TED Talk.
That's incredible. That's unbelievable. What's the name of the non-for-profit?
She hasn't launched it yet. So I'll keep it on the DL, but it's coming out soon. It's all in the works.
If you could invite 3 people for dinner, dead or alive, who would you invite?
Oh gosh. Okay. I have to get a rapper in there. So I'd probably have this weird mixture of like Neil Diamond, Ice Cube, and then maybe like, I don't know. I have to throw something unexpected in there, right? Like, so maybe Mother Teresa or something. Like, how do you add the good, the rapper, and the entertainer together? How do you mix those?
The good, the bad, and the ugly. If you could study with any expert in the world, who would you study with?
Definitely a psychologist. I love psychology. Anyone. I mean, anybody.
What book have you recommended most to others? Apart from your own books.
No, I don't recommend my own books. I mean, not that I don't recommend them, but I don't live like that. I have, The Tipping Point is awesome. But Made to Stick is probably the one I've recommended the most.
Made to Stick?
Made to Stick. Yeah. Why things go viral and why other things don't. Really good book.
Now I want to read it. What opportunity has come your way that you are glad you turned down?
Oh, to work with a really, really famous speaker one time. I turned that down. I was like, no, not doing that. There was an ego that came with it. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not, yeah, let's just end it there.
What lesson took you the longest to learn?
To be yourself, like to really tap into your own creativity. It's there and you have it all. You have everything within you that you need, and just to really rely on that.
What are 2 or 3 things that you've always wanted to do that are still on your bucket list?
Well, I have a life goal list. That's what I call it, to walk 10 of the most amazing bridges with 10 people I love before I die. And so I've only done 3, so I've got 7 to go.
Love it. If you had 6 months left to live, how would you spend them?
Experiences with people that I love, walking bridges everywhere. I would just like go all over the world, and I would take people that I love with me, and I'd freaking live life hard.
That's so original. I've never heard anyone say the bridges thing. Is there any specific connection with you and bridges?
Yeah, I mean, I saw Brooklyn. I went to the Brooklyn Bridge when I was a kid, and I asked my parents, like, how did people build this? I mean, I'm this little, right? And I'm like, whoa. And then it became a metaphor in my life of like many times something's just right on the other side. There's a bridge. Sometimes you want to leave something on the other side of the bridge and not bring it back. It's connection. Like there's just so many metaphors have come up for me. And so I started this thing. Yeah, it's my second TED Talk was on bridge walking bridges with people. So.
Oh, I love it.
It's fun. Yeah.
And the final question that all the guests get, the champagne question.
Ooh, champagne.
If we were to meet a year from now with a bottle of champagne, what are we celebrating in Cathey Armillas' life?
Well, we would first and foremost be celebrating. It would be the first time I've ever drank alcohol, because I've never drank alcohol. So I'd probably be as fuck. So that would be hilarious. You would have a great time and be like, wow, she is absolutely hammered. And this is like noteworthy. But I think some of the things that we would be celebrating are things that are happening that aren't in my work life. Some of the things that are going on in my family and people that I love. And I'm an amazing Aunt Cathey. I just helped my niece who's autistic get her first job. We sat down and I coached her through the interview and she got the job. And so like, these are things that feel special to me. Like, so it would probably be a lot of things like that.
I always love it when we can use our superpowers or those things that we're really good at to help others cross those bridges.
Yep.
It's incredible. I helped one of my students pitch her cleaning services company that she created here with her parents. They're from Venezuela. And she pitched it to like a government thing. There was like 30 other people that have come through this process. And she showed me the PowerPoint. I'm like, this is too long. Let's just say this, like straight to the juice. And she won the whole thing.
And she got it. Oh my gosh.
And again, it was dependent on that 5-minute presentation. And she got a bunch of money, a bunch of opportunities and everything. And you're like, we actually bridged this whole thing. It's incredible. I'm very happy.
Oh, Stephan, that's awesome. Like that's so cool. I love that. Yeah, I love that. I agree.
Thank you. I think we've helped a lot of people with this, because I have a lot of friends who want to do a TED Talk. And like I always tell when I teach my how to be an MC session of the course, of the level 2 course, I say sometimes teaching something is easier by saying the don'ts than the do's. And in this case, I think we covered a lot of don'ts, a lot of do's that will 100% help them not just deliver a TEDx talk if they so desire in the future, but how to really influence people and get them to listen and remember them later. As Maya Angelou says, they'll forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And I think going straight to the juice, being yourself, does make people remember you. So thank you for everything and your time.
Yeah, muchas gracias. Thank you. This was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cathey. I really admire you. Thank you for your time. We'll put the links to your books and programs in the show notes. And until next time, my friend.
Until next time.
Cathey Armillas, Stephan Dyer on the Stephan Dyer Podcast. Ciao, ciao.
Gracias por escuchar el Stephan Dyer Podcast. Arrivederci, my people.